afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for another Secret Sunday session today. Today I'm joined by Lucie, all the way from USA, and today we're going to be talking all about Lucie's journey and her recovery journey from her eating disorder. Now, in this space, especially at The Secret Burden, we love talking about eating disorders and raising awareness. And so today we're going to get to Lucie's story and start that conversation that we believe needs to be talked about. And with no further ado, let's get to Lucie. And I think, as always, let's start off, Lucie, by just if you could just explain to everyone who you are and basically what is your story.
Hi, I'm Lucie. I'm the author of the Jots Becoming, and I am a Caroline Costin Institute Eating Disorder Recovery Coaching intern right now. And my story was I was someone who grew up struggling with my mental health. I started struggling with my anxiety when I was very young. And one of the main symptoms of anxiety can be nausea for me. And it caused me to not want to eat when I was anxious. And I sort of correlated over time, like restriction with calmer moods. And then when I realized it had an effect on my weight, I started to fixate on that. And when I joined a sport, I ran cross country, and not eating enough and overexerting myself, it led to an eating disorder. So I realized, like, oh, I can keep going with this. There was a sort of mindset of like I saw results and I wanted to keep getting them. And I spent a lot of years in and out of treatment centers. And while I was in treatment, I started journaling. The last place I went to had a creative writing group, which I absolutely loved. And a year later, I took a lot of those entries and published my own book. One of the things that's helped me a lot is the recovery community and working with Project Heal, where 20% of my book money goes to, because like it was the first time I met people and saw people who were recovered and who were excited about recovering or were motivated to do it. And that was like something I had never been really exposed to before.
No, I completely agree. As we said before, that recovery community is exceptional. And once you get involved with it, it's amazing how it can make you feel and how it can make you want to pursue recovery as well. I want to take you back to those first moments when you were diagnosed and going through your eating disorder. How old were you?
I was 14.
Wow. And during that time, were you attending school?
I was a freshman, so first year in high school.
Yeah. And so how did your eating disorder affect your education and going to school?
It really had an impact on my education. I think being diagnosed October of my first year of high school, so that means like I went into a high school struggling already. And then within the second month of being there, I was hit with this diagnosis. And it was hard because I always felt like there was this wall between me and everyone else. Because especially, this makes me feel old, it was way back in 2014, eating disorders weren't talked about like they are today. Like no one knew what they really were. And it wasn't something that I had ever really heard of anyone else struggling with. And I thought it was something that I was dealing with my own. And I went to a magnet high school. So there was an emphasis on working really hard and always being on top of things and just this high competition. And I really was worried if I took time off school, I would miss too much work. So I really tried to keep my eating disorder hidden for a long time. But that prevented me from getting close to anyone. And I never really wanted to go over to friends' houses or go places with friends because I was worried so they saw me like with food and I wasn't eating, that it would raise alarms. So I sort of kept to myself a lot of the time. And when I graduated, I went on to college, but I didn't I was only in college for a few weeks before I had to leave for my eating disorder. Because especially the college environment when you're 24/7 on your own, your time is your own, no one's watching you eat, no one's watching what you're doing. It caused a recipe when I was already struggling with my eating disorder for it to completely take over.
Mm. So when you were diagnosed with your eating disorder, were you comfortable with sharing with other people that, hey, I've got an eating disorder, this is what I'm going through, or did you not tell anyone?
I I think I told one person, I told a friend, but
Mm,
I didn't really know what it meant
mm,
or what the diagnosis meant. I was sort of like, this is something I'm going through. I think I might have been really casual about it
mm,
and like slipped it into the conversation, but I didn't really think that it was anything serious or was anything that was going to happen. And it took me a long time to realize that.
mm.
And even when I went to treatment my second year of high school, I didn't really tell anyone I was going other than did te- my parents told my teachers afterwards for getting makeup work.
And if we look at, a lot of people don't understand what entails and what is involved with an eating disorder. Could you explain to me, in the middle of the moment when you were diagnosed and going through your eating disorder, what each day looked like for you in terms of what was going on inside your head?
I kept thinking like, so what I was going through is real. Like it has a name now, and there was a certain sense of pride to that, or that I was carrying around something and no one else knew about. But also, I kept thinking, did I have to tell like people now? Is it an illness?
Mm,
And what did it mean? I was so like hyper focused on behaviors. It's like when I got diagnosed, I didn't get treated right away. I sort of went like about my life just with this new thing. There weren't that many resources in my town, and I felt like something I had to explain and keep hidden for sure. The times I tried to open up to my Jewish community about it, I remember being told that like Jewish people don't get eating disorders because like of a cultural, we just like food too much. And so I really felt like for a while until I went to treatment that I was the only one who kind of like ever struggled with it. And the only person I remember feeling like a huge connection to was I remember watching the Red Band Society on TV, which I do not recommend for eating disorders, and finding a character that was relatable, which like wasn't a good thing at the time, but feeling some sort of connection that way.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that and feel so alone during your diagnosis and then your treatment. Like, it sounds awful to feel that you couldn't even talk to anyone about this, and not even knowing yourself what you were going through and having to deal with that alone. That is awful. And I'm so sorry that you had to go through that at such a young age as well.
I forgot how young 14 really is.
Mm,
And it's something I still think about. Like at the time, I was like, oh, whatever, this is like my life, this is my experience. Then one time I saw this 14-year-old talking about the recovery from an eating disorder on my For You page, TikTok, and she looked so young.
mm,
And I was like, oh my God, 14-year-olds are really young.
mm. Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and,
it's crazy.
and even working with kid teenagers this summer, like this past summer, it really made me realize that like that was a lot to go through at like such a age of transition and such an age of like those like were kids who couldn't remember sometimes to bring their sunscreen out the door. Like it's like such a hard age to then be like thrown this like huge thing.
Mm. And talking about your diagnosis, when you said that you were diagnosed with your eating disorder, was that by a clinician?
Yeah, it was by my pediatrician.
Right. And so going to your pediatrician, do they then say this is what treatment looks like, or this is what you should follow? Or they just say, this is your diagnosis, go deal with it, see you later?
They sort of said this was my diagnosis. Like, here are some we have one therapist in the area who does eating disorders, but she was like 30 minutes away from where I went to school in my house and only did weekday appointments, which would not be good. Like when I was in high school all day and like she didn't take insurance. So there was just a lot of barriers.
Mm.
And so it was sort of like I feel like a lot of the hard thing about eating disorder treatment, I don't know if it's just the United States or it's everywhere, is there's a lot of this like wait and see approach. Like it's like, here's your diagnosis, here are some resources you can try. If it does, we'll see if this helps. If it doesn't help, we'll let you sink really low and then get you to a hospital. But there's almost like a wait and see to see if like it goes away on its own or we have to like
Mm.
hospitalize you. And I even felt that way when I was at college. Like with my clinicians in a certain sense were like, we can't do anything for you. Either we can manage it how it is, or if it gets bad enough, you'll leave school.
So bad. It's and honestly, I feel it happens here as well. And talking to other people from other countries, it happens everywhere, and it's awful, and it's not supposed to be happening to young people. It's dreadful to have to, go to a clinician and you're going to ask for help, and it's like they wipe their hands and they're like, all right, go home, go see if all this works. If it doesn't, then come back. But they don't come back because they're traumatized by the system, and then they just end up clogging the hospital system. And then we go, why do we not have any hospital beds? Well, it's like, why aren't we focusing on prevention?
Or why aren't we prevention and actually like early intervention, like trying something before it? Like it's eating disorders, I realize, are not just something that goes away on its own. Like by doing nothing, you're just letting the illness get worse. It's not like you okay, go home with your diagnosis. If you don't get any therapy, any diet, like any dietitians, like of course it's not going to get any better. Like the person isn't like you can't I realize like you can't just like read about recovery and like have a Pinterest board of like recovery inspiration and progressing your recovery on your own.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's something where you have to do the hard work and you have to do it with a team. When you did then start to go through recovery, did you have a team around you to support you through that process?
When I was an adult, when I was 18, I did. I started to have a team. My pediatric Around my 18th birthday, my pediatrician recommended again to see if it would work before like hospitalization, seeing a dietitian. And this time that I found one who would work with me and I started seeing her. And then from there, I started building a team. And I didn't realize how much like better it was having a team and having a therapist and just having people to talk to. And I felt like I trusted the process a lot more
Mm. And with,
when
well, sorry, you keep going.
when I liked them and I trusted them and I had a relationship.
Mm. And when you talk about your recovery process, did you follow a model or a treatment plan that was specifically made for eating disorder recovery?
Not exactly a plan. I followed a meal plan that was made for me and made for my recovery needs. And then I did, I guess, many different types of therapy with my therapist.
Mm.
So, which I think is like a mixture, a lot of different types. I know treatment centers like differentiate between like CBT and NDBT
Mm.
and I think everything was just sort of woven in together.
Mm. And did you find that that worked for you? Sort of, those treatment plans that are sort of molded in together, there's not one specific thing. Did that work for you in your situation?
Yes, because it felt a lot less formalized.
Mm.
Like when you're just like in treatment here, you're given like worksheets for CBT, and then it's like think of this thought you've had and then challenge it. But it's just so much easier to talk about real scenarios and real things you've struggled with
Mhm.
rather than talking about like hypothetical situations and how you deal with it in a group.
Right. And then so you obviously got treatment when you were sort of classed as an adult at 18. So with that, did you then go ahead and use that 30 minutes travel and go to that person that was the eating disorder specialist in your area, or did you travel elsewhere to get treatment?
So I ended up not using the specialist. I found out when I was 19 that, like, she wouldn't see me because she thought since I had had so much other treatment and all of that, I was considered like a chronic case and there was like nothing she could do for me. And so I ended up seeing a therapist I actually had met in treatment and who like wasn't at working at the treatment center anymore when she was worked there when I was 15, but then I started seeing her when I was 19 and she was a really great therapist. So it ended up working out for the long run. When telehealth, I have to say, is an amazing thing. Like it's one of the reasons that like I got involved with Clear Step 2 was telehealth, I think, can really help eating disorder treatment because it's helped me a lot.
Oh, I think it's phenomenal as well, where you can have access to help that's available across the world and you can make it work in your situation where previously we were so limited to, just our state or just our hometown. And there's already limited resources in a lot of small towns across the world. So now that we can have access to all those services, and ClearStep, as you said, is amazing. And what they do is phenomenal as well with the eating disorder community. I just want to give them a little shout out because they are phenomenal. But it's all about, having access to the resources in this space when there's already not enough resources in the area. I want to talk a little bit about America and its resources. Are there enough?
No, there seems like there are a lot. Like there's an overwhelming amount of options, but a lot of them are clustered in areas. The America is very, very big. So like there might be 6 in one state,
Mm.
but that is like all the way across the country. But then there are 9 in one town or within 3 hours of that one town.
Right.
And there isn't a lot of step down. We have this system. There are 6 levels of care. So we have inpatient, residential, partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient, and outpatient. There's not a really helpful way to step down because not a lot of places offer every single level of care. So then you have to transition a bunch of times. And for instance, I could go across the country or across my state for residential because you fly once and then you just live there. But then PHP, where you are supposed to go home every night, if there's not one in your city, then you're screwed.
Mm. Wow. And do you find, or are you seeing working in this space, that these environments, these residential houses, these outpatient programs, are they working? Are they getting results? People are recovering?
I don't I actually don't think so, not in a way that they should. I think they get someone to, like, this very quasi vulnerable state where they, like, just restored, they've just stopped behaviors, and then they step out into this world of all these triggers and less support, and I feel like everything just gets dropped from them at once. And
Mm.
even when you transition to a different level of care and you have to start over with all new therapists, all new dietitians, it's a lot for someone. And then the solution, if someone like relapses, is just to send them back into the same system.
Mm.
And then I think people get into this mode of, I've tried so many different places, and it almost becomes like this bragging right. These eating disorders are so competitive, and it just becomes this like really was hard not to get absorbed into that world because it's so
Mm.
like it's so easy to get caught in it. It's like the revolving door of treatment.
Mm.
And I'm really hoping as a recovery coach and or soon to be recovery coach that I can help try to see like that can be a better alternative than just sending people in and out of these centers that are mainly focused on like the nutrition part, which is really important, but you're pretty much some of them I went to one where you didn't really have that many therapy groups. we pretty much hung out all day in between meals. So
Wow.
you were just living there and
Being fed.
yeah.
It's so awful, especially when you look at eating disorders and it's not about the food. Like, I find in so many situations, food is the coping mechanism, and it's the thing that people use to deal with what they're actually hiding or the trauma that they actually need to cope with. And I completely agree. A lot of these centers or these programs focus so much on the food and avoid the issue that that's the thing when they get put back into normality or the real world, it's like, well, they haven't dealt with the trauma or the cause. They've just dealt with the effects. The effect is just going to come straight back in because you haven't given them the skills and the techniques to deal with this. And then we wonder why we see so many relapse statistics. It's just no one is investing in these young people or people going through an eating disorder so that they can flourish and succeed in life instead of continually have to deal with their eating disorder.
And I think one of the most painful things for people who relapse and then have to go back in is, especially American treatment centers, like eating disorders aren't a choice, the recovery is possible, and like they send out all that messaging. But if someone relapses in return, it was their fault. They failed. Like the blame's on them. And all of a sudden it is a choice and something that could have been avoided. But they weren't taught the skills, and our system isn't like works in such a black and white way that you're either healthy enough to stay out of the hospital or you need to go somewhere, and a sort of wait and see that almost it feels like this learned helplessness that I didn't realize until I worked with a team that there's actually that happens so much between like the beginning stages of recovery and the end stages.
Wow. And looking at your recovery journey, would you say that you were stuck in that causey recovery period as well?
I was stuck for a while. Yeah, I think like I didn't even know it was I thought that was the best it could be. Like you really need someone to like push you outside, and that's why I loved working with a recovery coach.
Mm.
But someone to like guide you through doing challenges and really process and help you come up with goals. It's really easy to get to a point where you've been following a meal plan for a while and like your thoughts have quieted a little and you're not using behaviors as much and you're like, oh, this is the best it's going to get. And then because you don't know what other challenges you have without someone else like sort of helping to guide you.
And looking at your story now, do you think that you're fully recovered from your eating disorder?
I do.
That's awesome.
And I definitely wonder like sometimes like how sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how did that happen? Like I can't even imagine. And it's not something I think about as much now that I've been in full recovery for a while. Like I don't think every day like, am I fully recovered? Am I not? But then there are certain situations where I'm reminded, like, yeah, I am definitely fully recovered.
That's awesome. It is. It's one of those things where you constantly second guess yourself, almost like, am I? Am I not? Yes. And then something happens and you're like, wow. Or you talk to someone else that's still going through their recovery and you're like, wow, I really am recovered and I've really beat this. And I just want to say congratulations on that journey because that is phenomenal because I know how hard it is and I'm sure everyone else out there who has gone through an eating disorder understands how difficult it is. So congratulations on that journey. And then leading into your book, congratulations on that as well. How was that process for you?
I loved writing it and I loved looking through my old journal entries. The title actually came from I was reading some of my old journal entries to see what I wanted for my book. And I have all my journals from I've ever written during my eating disorder, during my recovery. And I looked back at some of the entries I wrote during my eating disorder. And I was like, wow, like you can feel like hear like the struggle, like you can see it in the page. You can see just like the mundaneness, the like sort of helplessness. And then I started reading some of my recovery entries and you could see the progress happening through my writing. And I thought, like, what a cool way to tell a story instead of telling it that through a number or like the traditional way of like this person was X pounds and now they're just this and they're out of the hospital. Really tell it in a way that show just thoughts.
Mm.
And I took out all the numbers and it was cool. And I loved seeing it land in the hands of different people all around the world. And the hardest part was actually having my family, like, and close friends buy my book
Okay.
because, I think you have family members who maybe you talk to once a year or you saw them around the holidays, reading your deepest thoughts is,
Mm.
like, a very strange concept.
Yeah, amazing. Well, congratulations on being so vulnerable with that book because, as you said, you're kind of opening up and opening your front door for everyone to come in the time that you're at your most vulnerable. How was journaling for you during that process? Did you find that getting all your thoughts out on paper really helpful?
At first I didn't understand what the point of it was, because I was told it was just to be a brain dump, like, just write whatever thoughts come to your mind. So when you're in your eating disorder, like I felt like that for me, I was very much like food and what I thought about the food and behaviors and all of that. And then I had a therapist say like journaling can be really helpful if it's like guided or structured. And when I started doing more structured journaling, it opened the door for it being helpful.
Mm.
And some of the like types of prompts I love the most are like writing a letter to yourself
Yeah.
and sort of like separating you from like yourself and what you would tell someone else and asking like these questions and finding quotes and then writing about the quote and then all of a sudden and really challenging the thoughts as you go instead of just writing them down, and then that became really helpful. And I noticed I could write things I was struggling with, like, on paper that I couldn't say out loud. So it became a really amazing tool for my therapist and I to do some of the deeper work. Because, like, during in between sessions, she would tell me to journal about something, and I would do it, and then I would read it to her, and then we would talk about it. Like,
Amazing.
sometimes it can be hard to think of these very deep questions in a moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then when you have all that out there on paper, it's a good conversation starter if you feel like, as you said, you can't get the words out there. So, congratulations on that. Is there any last advice or tips that you want to offer to someone that may be struggling with their eating disorder or going through recovery at the moment? What would your message be to them?
The message I always give is you don't have to be ready to start. Like, readiness or motivation isn't the most important thing. It's just putting one foot in front of the other day after day. And like every step you take against your eating disorder is a step towards recovery. And those steps do add up.
That's amazing. Absolutely love that because it is. Everyone's like, you've got to be ready for recovery and you've got to act now and you've got to take those steps. And sometimes it is. It's just stripping back and going, some days you just got to put one foot in front of the other and you just have to keep going. So that's amazing advice. And I think that your journey and your story is phenomenal. And I thank you so much for sharing that with me today. And know that everyone else, you can learn a lot more about Lucie's journey on her Instagram page and also by purchasing her book. Do you want to give a little shout out to where people can find you online and where they can purchase your book from?
You can purchase my book on Amazon. It's called The Jots of Becoming. And you can find me on Instagram at living.as.lucy.
Beautiful. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining me today, Lucie. It has been a phenomenal conversation with an amazing story and an amazing outcome to follow, which we just always want to show you that recovery is possible and that you really can get through this. If this video was triggering at all, please know that there are services available for you. If you were struggling with an eating disorder and you've thought that some stories line up or there's some conversations that seem similar, know that you can, here in Australia, you can access the Butterfly Foundation, the Black Dog Institute, Inside Out, us at The Secret Burden, we're always here to have a chat. And I'm sure if you send a message to Lucie, she would be happy to say hi and see how she can help as well. But know there is services out there that can help you. So don't sit in causey recovery or don't sit in the suffering any longer. Know that you can get help and that there are people out there that can make your recovery journey a positive experience. So once again, thank you, Lucie, for joining me. And you can check Lucie out all online, and we will catch you all next week for another Secret Sunday session. But for now, good afternoon, and we will see you all very soon.